Very complicated. In the hierarchy of these kinds of systems, the simplest part of the whole thing is the cable. That's just the thing in the ground. Making all the rest of this stuff happen is much more complicated. The stuff is expensive. It's about, their Zayo says it's about $70 a square foot for them to put it in. We talked about whether we can connect to it through other means, like going down through AT&T, which uses fiber and so forth. It can be done. It's very complicated. It's not cheap. But it's something to consider. Everybody that I talk to, whether they be at Zayo themselves, or Mira, or the Marine Telecommunications, nobody thinks any of this would be free. And nobody saw, as of right now, a public safety benefit to the program. There is some talk that maybe FirstNet in the future would be a good candidate for that. But it's not the only fiber that's out there. That's one system out there. There's a lot of other systems out there. So, for example, it was suggested that we should connect to the Woodacre Fire Department. Woodacre Fire Department already uses cable. They use cable to make their CAD system work. They use lease lines from AT&T. Marin County has a big fiber network called the Minus One, which serves a lot of people, both in government, the libraries, government agencies, police departments, and so forth, nonprofits and whatnot. They do leasing lines from AT&T. So the bottom line is this, that the Zayo fiber optic loop is not a sitting right there, ready to go, solves all our problems, just connect, it's free, and piece of cake. It's extremely complicated whether or not this will have benefit in the future. No closed mind to this, but massive data transfer from our communications center through that is not a need that we're going to have. And I want to point out one more thing. Fiber is not disaster-proof. None of the other systems, Mira is not disaster-proof, satellite phones aren't, nothing is disaster-proof. This is from Earth Week, August 1st, just happened. Powerful earthquake up in Alaska, severed the key fiber optic line on July 25th, leaving Southeast Alaska without cell phone and television internet service. That's a 5.9 quake. That's not very big. Nobody got hurt, no buildings hurt. So just like any other system, fiber has its downside to and its risk. Just like gas lines get hit by construction crews, fiber lines get hit by them too. Earthquakes can come. So, is it worth considering? Yes. But you need to put this in a larger perspective out here. Our Mira system is a good system. Hopefully we fund it to become a much better system. The people who run it, who are responsible for this, who are expert on this, who I've met with, are very confident where it's going. I sit on the governing board with it. I think it's a good program. So I think we should have some confidence in this, and I think we also have a very good backup plan, which is appropriate for a community center. We are not the fire department, and I think we will be in good stead if we're able to put all that in place. Okay.
Okay, Rich, thanks, Rich. Now it falls to me to talk about the arrangements that we'd like to try to strike with the Homes Association if we proceed forward with this based upon the evaluation of the merits, the comments we get from people. A couple of things you need to know first is that we have looked at a possible arrangement from lots of different perspectives, financially, operationally, and otherwise. In all cases, this is going to be an arm's length, bargained for arrangement where both sides are going to have their wish lists and are going to have to give something to get something. We would like to get the right to use the clubhouse, as we've said, for an office, for storage, for conducting our meetings and trainings, and then also for using it for emergency purposes, such as shelter, evacuation, and that sort of thing. And we're coming from, as you may recall from our April 6th meeting, a long history of thriftiness, self-reliance, and very long-term thinking. We're not going to jump into anything impulsively. What we would like to do is, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, so you don't need to move the slides, right? But our goal is to come up with a game plan for how we would try to negotiate with the Homes Association, and we'll get to that in a minute. But before we get there, let's talk very briefly about the lease or the arrangement that we will make to be able to use the clubhouse as we would like to. What we did was we asked two of the leading commercial real estate firms in the region to opine on our proposal. That includes an evaluation of the comparable rental rates for properties in the Ross Valley, and also included various analyses that factored in the unique backup systems that we'll have here, water and power, which you don't get at most locations, the pool, which we'll have available for training, which you don't get at a typical office location, as well as what the discounted present value might be if we opted, instead of investing in this project, to park our money in an asset that has a fixed rate of return. So we've sliced this thing in a number of ways, and we'll get to each one of them individually. Basically, we talked with Mark Carrington first at Cornish & Carey, Newmark Knight Frank Commercial. He's one of the leading brokers in the North Bay. He's done over $2.5 billion worth of transactions from San Diego to Anchorage in his career. He provided us with some spreadsheet calculations that, working off of the square footage numbers that we gave him and his knowledge of local comparable properties, he gave us some figures that would show, and do show, that if we pay up to $2 million, we're going to be making a great bargain for ourselves. Because to try to duplicate the arrangement that we'd like to get elsewhere, off-site, somewhere in the Ross Valley, outside of our own district, it would cost us a lot more than just $2 million. In fact, I'm a little bit worried that the Homes Association is going to push back now and say we're giving you too good of a deal. But I hope that's not the case. In any event, you see some figures there that we've put up on the board. I think you can do the math or go to the website yourself and run the numbers. We've tried to simplify it as much as we can. This assumes, of course, the going rental rates with a 3% annual increase, or 15% every 5 years, which is very reasonable. We also consulted, could you hang on just a second? We also consulted with Stephen Easley. He's the vice president at Cassidy Turley, another one of the region's leading brokerages. Steve is the founder and was the president of Meridian Commercial before he moved to Cassidy Turley. He provided us with data about properties both in and outside of the Ross Valley, what the rental rates currently are. Of course, it's very difficult to find a strictly comparable property to this anywhere in the market. So we've had to do a little bit of stretching of what constitutes a comparable in order to get the data that we need to work with. Rich, maybe you can go to the next slide. So what we did in our analysis is we tried to look at what we thought was the total public safety value of what we want to do, not strictly basing it upon rental rates and that sort of thing. What do we capture here if we're able to do this? And we think it exceeds $4 million. $4 million for our $2 million investment. Now, the reason is that the Homes Association is going to contribute the land. We're going to contribute some of the building costs, and you residents are contributing through your donations another $500,000 worth of cash. We think that together with the leasehold valuations that we've performed exceed $4 million. For instance, we're not even including any of the quote-unquote intangible values that the brokers tell us are reasonable to consider when you're deciding whether to rent a property. That includes the peace of mind that you get when you know that you've got an asset like this nearby your home. The convenience factor, the ability for us to have an office, to leverage our resources, to hold the trainings, meetings, and those sorts of things that are not currently available to us and can't be created elsewhere in the district. So what we did was, in addition to the rough, or the straight-ahead calculation on rental rates, we said, what would happen if we, instead of proceeding with this, what would happen if we put our money to work in some sort of a highly conservative investment? If we park that money for 60 years, like we're proposing to do here, into something that has a reasonable basis to return money to us. Well, assuming the annual 3% CPI increases, and the current yields on 30-year treasuries, which are 3.38%, we again came up with a value that well exceeds $2 million. In fact, we ran a second scenario using 4% on the 30-year treasuries just to see what it would do, and it produced an even more beneficial effect for us. Just a note on that, someone said to me in passing in the neighborhood, you should be using the 10-year treasuries, because that's what's used as the basis for most mortgages. And we ran that as well, although we didn't ask the experts to do it, but we did that ourselves. And as you may know, the 10-year treasury rates are quite low. They carry less durational risk than the 30s, of course, because more things can happen over a 30-year period. But what I did was, taking our 60-year term, which is equal to the current life of the building. As you know, this building has reached the end of its life. benign neglect is no longer a feasible strategy for this building. So I tried to find a comparable period of 60 years for the 10-year treasuries. I couldn't get 60, but I found 70. And I'll tell you what, that the median yield over the last 70 years for 10-year treasuries is 6.25%. So we're being even more conservative than the 10-year treasuries would pay. And that's, of course, assuming the 10 years revert to normal over this next 60-year period.